So, Dr. Luc, what is the problem with primarily using antidepressants to treat depression?
Yes, well, many people will obviously say, and with very much conviction, that it saved their life, you know, when they were start taking these drugs, that really it changed things around for them, and that really we're happy that they have found them. Now, the question is, of course, were they active, or was it just a placebo effect that they're really responding to? And I say this because the big study that was done in the United States between 1988 and 1998, on request of the FDA, the Food and Drug Association, in order to approve these drugs. It came out later, not at the same time, they won't tell the public obviously, but came out later that the result of the 10-year study showed that the good effects, the effect of these particularly 6 drugs, were no better, zero better than a placebo. In other words, than a dummy pill, a dumb pill, a sugar pill. So this becomes, of course, a big problem because if this is the case, if there's no really real chemistry effect on the brain really done by these particular drugs, and if you can really have the same effect with a sugar pill, with really placebo, then the question becomes, why are we giving drugs that are so expensive, $4 a day, and with side effects? Yeah. And if people want to withdraw from these drugs, they're also going to have severe they can't just stop. They're going to have severe withdrawal symptoms. So this becomes very important. Why this would be, it was Professor Kirsch from the University of Connecticut who actually brought this up, this study, and just flat out said, these drugs don't work. Yet, of course, they're still available. The most important, you know, you might say, well, this maybe was just one study, but it was a very important one, you know, really on request of the FDA to approve these drugs when they were approved. That's the next question.
And it was done over 10 years.
It was done over 10 years.
Yep.
Not only that, just now, in January 2010, just now, another university has done the same study and came to the same conclusion. No effects, zero. In other words, these are just dummy pills. In fact, Professor Kirsch wrote an article about it, now the same who really did this, the first study. And he wrote, you know, ironically, because it is his book, you know, Listening to Prozac, and he basically coined his particular article, Listening to Prozac and Hearing Placebo, which is basically what it is. So this becomes a problem, obviously, more for the pharmaceutical companies, and I probably would say patients and doctors, physicians, have to start really thinking, is this really the better way of first giving people with, you know, drugs? Because really, all we do is give them a placebo that costs money and gives side effects. It's a very important question that needs to be answered, but obviously, you would think when this is happening that physicians would be very angry at pharmaceutical companies to be misled, and so are the patients. Actually, just the opposite happened. The Professor Kirsch, who really brought this out, a very well-known researcher, and now it's confirmed again by other people, now 10 years later, you would think that physicians would really be mad to be deceived like this, and it was almost just the opposite, because they get angry at the person who brought this up. And why would that be? It's a simple answer to it, because we know what is a physician supposed to do. What is he supposed to do? Because now you take the weapon out of his hand, and what is he supposed to do? He's not supposed to give a placebo and say this is, you know, in charge, his fee. So this becomes a problem, and therefore it almost seems to be that, you know, don't tell too much, you know, just be silent and don't tell too much about all this. And you know, the truth really can be said. In other words, it looks like not many people want to hear the truth. That really is the sad thing about this. So this is a kind of a bombshell, and one has to start asking ourselves too, what about other drugs? And by the way, other drugs trials have been done, so like analgesics, you know, just painkillers, that amazingly enough weren't more than a placebo effect neither. So as you see, it's unfortunately the scientific findings are not really keeping up with what they call, what they're doing with basically the PR they're doing on TV and everything like that. It seems to be just a PR stunt, and yet millions of people have taken these drugs. Millions of them, of course, say, I got better with it, but so did, in other words, actually it went from 75% of the people were just as good with the placebo as with the drug. That means 75% of the chemical effect of the drugs, of the regular Western medical drugs, are just placebo effect. They were no better than placebo. And in fact, when they chastised this researcher, and they should have been grateful to him, and trying to sabotage him, when they said, well, you didn't do all the studies. You must realize that when for the approval of the drugs, the pharmaceutical company might be doing 100 studies, and they might use 40. That's about the right percentage, 40% of those studies to actually use to really get the approval of the drug.
Yeah.
So now they said to the researcher, well, you should do all the studies. Well, he did. When he did all the studies, the 100% of the studies, it actually became worse, not better. It went from 75% to 80%, to 82%. So it really is such a fact. And the question can be asked, of course, why would the FDA then approve such thing, right? But this is what most people don't know neither. In order to approve a drug, only 2 drug trials must be just show a little bit of a better effect than a placebo. So a good scientific research about a drug, only 2 studies have to be submitted to the FDA, and only has to show an improvement, so in comparison with the placebo effect. But they don't even say how much, by the way, so it can be just 1%, okay? 1%, and that also means for it to be approved. So if you have 2 studies like that, it's approved. Even if 100 studies of the same thing, of the same drug, shows no improvement. 2 is enough. See, this is what's wrong, of course, too. So people don't know this, so, why is the FDA approving it? Well, because that's the standard that we are using for the approval of drugs.